Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. Today I'll be talking about 5 more pieces of lost media. So let's begin. Previously, last episode, we talked about Pyramid. It was a sequel to a previous game called Castle Take. That game is also lost, and now we'll talk about that game. Castle Take was released in 1978 by the same company, Sankyo, and it was a breakout clone. Now, it, like its successor, had a theme. Castle Take's theming was feudal Japan, and the point of the game was for you to try and take over a pagoda. Now, there were 2 variations of this arcade game made. There was a upright version, the common version of an arcade game you'll typically see, and a sit-down cocktail table version that was also made. Now, we actually have a few advertisements of this game from various magazines, and we even have a few gameplay screenshots of it, so we know what it looked like. Now, the graphics and the colors of Castle Take were considered very advanced for their time period, given this was only 1978, and color games had only just really been invented, and graphics were still getting there, and the pagoda looked like how you expect one to look with your colors and stuff. And now we don't know how many sold. It's like we don't know how many Pyramid sold, but clearly it had sold enough to get a sequel. Now, no ROMs or video footage of this game has surfaced, unlike its successor, but so we only really have the few screenshots we have to go off of, and what we know is clearly a breakout clone with some minor variations of just a direct clone of it. But besides that, we have nothing else about the Castle Take. Number 2, Maneater. Maneater was an arcade game released in January of 1975 by a company known as Project Support Engineering, or PSE. Now, there were 2 versions of this arcade cabinet. There was a traditional regular arcade cabinet, and a second, much more well-known version, where the cabinet was built to look like a shark's mouth that had opened up, with the screen being inside of the mouse shark, and the controls being on the bottom half of the shark's mouth. Now, it was released the same year as Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, though it did release several months prior to its release, as Jaws didn't come out till June of 1975, but it could easily be seen as cashing in to the people who didn't know it actually predated it. Now, we have 2 advertisements of it in 2 separate issues of Playmeter. And from what we know about the game, you and another person would have played as scuba divers, trying to collect treasure from the bottom of the sea and bringing it up to the surface while avoiding being eaten by sharks. Now, we actually have a photograph of Steven Spielberg sitting with the arcade cabinet, and footage of it surfaced in 2012. So we actually have gameplay footage of it, so we know it looks like an action. But despite this, so no ROMs have surfaced, and we do have a few cabinets online, but the game is still unplayable, as it seems to only be in the hands of collectors. As in the video, we can see other arcade machines wrapped in saran wrap, and even see a green-colored computer space game, the first game by Atari, though they were not under that name yet. They were under Syzygy. That was the original name. But since we know of a few other cabinets, there's at least one working cabinet out there somewhere in the world, and there seems to be a few other cabinets. So, though whether or not they work or not is unknown. So most likely, eventually, there will be some kind of release of Maneater, as there have been a few arcade machines of it found and photographed online, seemingly in storage rooms. Now, on to number 3. Jim Henson, best remembered for creating characters like Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, created a series of commercials starring 2 puppet characters, one known as Wilkins and one known as Wilkins, between 1957 and 1969. These commercials were well known for featuring extreme comic violence and their dark humor, as Wilkins was always the person who enjoyed the product they were trying to sell in the commercials, and would always attempt to pressure Wilkins into buying the product. But when Wilkins refused to purchase the product, he would usually punish him severely with some kind of physical violence, or would threaten him with physical violence, in the case that in an attempt to get them to purchase the product. Now, they were called this because they were originally meant to sell Wilkins coffee. Now, they produced 179 commercials for Wilkins coffee between 1957 and 1961, but only 135 of these are available online. And alongside that, they produce commercials for 12 other companies, many of which are lost. Now, for one company in particular, the Standard Oil, now for one of them in particular, National City Bank, is entirely lost. We don't know how many were made, and they're all entirely lost. They're all entirely lost. Now, only a few companies have all their commercials found, and these are Frank's Beverages, Dugan's Bread, and Tasty Bread. Besides these, all other companies have missing commercials. And some of them we don't. And for companies like Standard Oil of Ohio or Sohio, we have commercials, but we don't know how many of them were made. If you go online, you can find storyboards for many commercials from a variety of different companies that only exist in these storyboard forms and have no video trace of them. Their longest commercial company they worked for was Community Coffee, which lasted up until 1969, and we have some Community Coffee storyboards which have no footage of. So at least for these, we have some kind of semblance of what they would have looked like if they had filmed. But of course, there's also a good chance there are many commercials which don't even have storyboards to them. And since most of them we don't know how many are made, there could be upwards of who knows how many commercials starring these two which are just completely lost to time. And of course, these were commercials, so nobody really bothered to record them. It's a miracle as many of them even exist today as it is. Number 4. Robert Johnson was an American blues musician, best remembered for songs like Me the Devil Blues and Crossroads, as he's considered an innovator in rock and roll music, and as described as having laid the groundwork for rock and roll music. Now, he died under very mysterious circumstances, being considered to be the first person to ever join the 27 Club, a sort of association of musicians who died at age 27, as his exact death is unknown. And according to legend, he obtained his blues guitar playing skills after a deal with the devil at the Crossroads, which is why he made songs like Me the Devil Blues and Crossroads. And he's also the subject of a film of that same name. Now he had 2 recording sessions done by a man known as Don Law. These recording sessions were done in 1936 and 1937. Don Law wanted to record them later on, but he found out that Robert Johnson had died. Now, in 1990, the complete works of Robert Johnson were released, and these included alternate takes of songs, with them only having 2 takes. Some songs only had 1 take, while the other songs had 2 takes. Now, this complete collection of all of the recordings totaled up to 41 songs. Now, here's the thing. Paperwork shows that Don Law recorded a total of 59 songs of Robert Johnson. This leaves in the question of what about these 18 other songs which have no documentation for, because the complete works only include 41 of the 59 songs that we know he recorded due to the paperwork showing. So whether or not these are original songs or could be alternate takes, because as I mentioned, not all of the songs had alternate takes to them. Some songs only had 1 take to them. So these lost 18 songs could consist of the other takes to the songs we only have 1 take of, or even extra takes to the ones we only have a 2nd take of. And again, there could be a possibility of whole entire lost songs. Though if that was true, there probably been more of a ruckus about it, much more known, and more stuff would have been said. But as we know now, 18 of the songs are completely gone, and most likely be gone forever due to how long ago they were recorded, and due to, at the time, how obscure it was outside of the Mississippi Delta. Number 5. On July 20th, 1969, mankind made history when the Apollo 11 ship landed on the moon. Of course, some of those famous men in astronaut history on there, like Neil Armstrong. Now, this was broadcasted to millions of Americans. It was one of the most viewed events in American history and television history as a whole, as it was a monumental effort to get man on the moon. Now, the thing is, the video footage that the people at NASA saw was much higher quality, much better than the footage that the people at home saw, as the camera used a thing known as the slow scan TV signal, or SSTS. Now the thing is, regular televisions couldn't do that. Regular TV stations like CBS and stuff, they couldn't process that. They couldn't take that. So what they did basically was take a TV-friendly camera and point it at one of the screens, and this allowed the TV stations to broadcast this. But the TV camera was much lower quality than the actual footage that the people at NASA were receiving. So the footage that we all saw and that the people in the TV studios saw was much lower quality than what the people at NASA were seeing. Now the thing is, these tapes are lost as they were put into storage after the Apollo 11 landing, and eventually sometime later on they attempted to find this original version of higher quality, but they were unable to find it, and they reckon that it was most likely completely wiped sometime in the 1980s or so before satellites needed magnetic tape, and that it had been unknowingly wiped. Now, all the other Apollo missions that landed on the moon have much higher quality footage than the Apollo 11 landing, but the original higher quality footage, which was giving us a much better look at what was going on there, is completely lost and most likely never be found unless there was a second copy made. But they searched and they couldn't find it, and the only thing they could conclude is that they wiped it accidentally when they needed more tape. And this could really change things. I mean, maybe if it had been a little bit higher quality, it would have been a little bit harder to deny it, because it is kind of bad, this footage. So maybe if it was higher quality, you'd have a lot harder of a time denying one of the greatest events in human history. Just saying, But anyways, that was 5 more pieces of lost media. I hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see y'all again sometime soon. So, bye, have a nice time.